I want to close this meetings part of the day with 3 strategies, approaches you can use to improve the quality of your meetings and especially making them much more powerful for learning. Several of you have already talked about these during the course of the morning. The first one I put first for a reason, which is simply about next steps. You need to figure out how in your meetings you both keep track of the next steps and follow up on them. Because most meetings, one of the places they fall down is that the next steps don't get clearly articulated, and even if they do, they don't get followed up on to see did they happen or not. So you need some system for that. What happens if the next steps aren't clear is either all of the next steps end up landing on the facilitator, because the facilitator is the one who kind of owned the agenda in the first place usually, and so it's like, oh, well, we ran out of time, so I'll just do that stuff. That you can only do so much, and so usually you'll get more done if the next steps are more distributed, and also more people will own the content of that meeting. The other thing that happens if they aren't articulated is nothing. Like nothing happens after the meeting because you didn't articulate things to happen after the meeting. So people are like, check, got that meeting done, on to my next meeting. But nothing is clearly set up. So there are different ways to keep track of next steps. In the agenda template, you see one, which is simply to both put time on the agenda, to capture them at the end of the session, and also a place on the agenda where they live. Now, I heard some of you talking earlier about different ways that you do next steps. Anybody else want to offer ways other than what is just sitting on the meeting-wise agenda template for how do you keep track of what the next steps are and then return to them at the next meeting just to see, did we do what we say we were going to do? And if we didn't, it's not a big deal. We just have to figure out, do we still care about it? And if so, how does it get done? Yeah, so you could assign a role of a next step person, like somebody who's keeping track during the meeting and also is the one who does that next. I heard one of you say you do a column, like you pull them out separately visually on your agenda as you go. Other ideas? All right, so in this meeting, we go ahead and put it on the agenda for the next meeting while we're in this meeting, so we know we're following up on that next. Doing that. The next thing we already talked about quite a bit earlier, which is plus delta, which is one way of checking in about how did the meeting go. And again, you see on the meeting-wise template, there's a place built in, a time on the agenda for plus delta. Now, if I am being honest, I will tell you, I'm about 50% in my meetings. Like I always have it on the agenda, but I don't always do it because we run out of time and I'm sitting there, I'm checking out, do I want to get one more comment in from that person or get more clear about the next steps, and we ran out of plus delta time. So there's a real discipline to the plus delta, but you can use an exit slip or you can use sticky notes on the way out the door, or you can say, hey, everybody's already in this Google Doc we're using, just write something into the Google Doc on the plus deltas on your way out the door. You can do quick things like that. And we talked about other ways of checking in, whether it's an exit slip, it's a formal evaluation, it's during the meeting checking in how things are going, but some way to check in on how the meetings are going. Now the trick is, you'll see on the template, it also has at the beginning of the next meeting, what were our plus deltas from last time and how are we using that to inform this time? So all of these tools are helping you connect one meeting to another. Otherwise, what happens is you do the plus delta at the end of one meeting, and then maybe somebody uses that to inform the next agenda, but they're not present for the whole group. So often they just get lost. And it's not obvious to people how their feedback is being used, or just reminding, like, we had this issue last time, let's see if we can do better about it next time. So if they're just written on the agenda, often you don't have to go through them one by one, but you can just say, here are our pluses and deltas from next time. We said it was a big deal, we crammed the agenda too much last time, we're really trying to trim it this time, let's see how we do with it. Just flag something that you're really, really working on. But one thing to keep in mind with the plus deltas is if you're the facilitator, it's really important to stay quiet while people are giving you the plus deltas. Because it is so tempting to tell them all the reasons that those deltas were really not that bad. Like, oh, I'm sorry you thought we were going to do that. I didn't think we were going to do that. We achieved my purpose, right? Or, you know, sorry, we didn't have any control over the internet, or whatever it is. Like, just keep your mouth shut and just nod and smile, and that creates an open space for people to actually give plus deltas. Often people are nervous about deltas at first if they're not used to them. So I say things like, I love deltas, would love to see some deltas. Nobody can leave the room till we have a delta. You know, those kinds of things. And then when people see that the deltas actually inform the next meeting, then they're more likely to give you some. I also just acknowledge if we got a delta, but we're not fixing it this time. Like, we got this delta, we can't do anything about it, or we got this delta, it's not applicable, or I just decided we couldn't do it, or whatever. But you still name that you get it, all right? So that makes a difference. The last thing I wanted to show you is the rolling agenda. And I heard some of you talking earlier about how you're practicing the rolling agenda in your own work. And one of the ways we talk about it in the MeetingWise book is that the rolling agenda is just go ahead and take notes right in the agenda. Just do it in a different color. You can take the notes. You don't need a fancy formal minutes afterwards and all that stuff. So I saw several of you practicing that, which is great. A way we've been evolving our practice around rolling agendas is around the question of how do you connect one meeting to another so that it stays present. People are busy in between these meetings, and so they can't always remember one meeting. So I'm gonna show you a couple rolling agendas. There's one that's linked to you here, for you here. So this is the one that there's a link to a template for a Google Doc that you can see. And basically, what it does is it tries to visually capture, and you can do this in a Google Doc or on paper or whatever electronic format you want. One of the things you have to figure out is, are we using technology to help us manage our meetings? And if so, how? But you'll see there's a grid at the top that basically has an ongoing summary of, here are the objectives for the meetings, and here are the next steps. And the way we use it is we keep the current meeting right at the top, and then once that meeting's done, it just gets bumped to the bottom of the list. But then you can see the previous meetings and the ones that are coming up. So sometimes we throw next steps in like 3 meetings away because it's not happening yet, but we know it's coming. Or we throw an objective for down the road because we know that's going to happen in March, but we don't have to deal with it yet. And that's a way of just visually keeping things in a really same place instead of everything being buried at the bottom of multiple agendas. So those are some ways of keeping present for people. What did we talk about last time? Where are we headed and where are we now? And how do we bridge in between those things? So just a couple tools to play with for you.